All right. Hi, everybody. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bummed out are you just to see me sitting here after that super cool introduction? Well, I hope to not disappoint because one of the things I've learned about the cybersecurity and information technology ecosystem is for the longest time, we operate on FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And while there's plenty to be afraid of and uncertain about and doubtful of, we want to make the pivot so that you can occasionally at least unleash some fun. And so I focus really more on the fun part, but so that you're not disappointed in that. That's why I bring in subject matter experts like Michael Garris. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Gary. Hey, everybody.
It's so great to have you. Of course, we're going to be talking about the incredible report. So why don't you share with us a little bit of your origin story and a little bit about the great report we're going to talk about?
Well, great. I'll keep it quick. So I'm coming from a career at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, where I'm a computer scientist. And I've been there a long time. But most recently, I've been privileged to be a part of something called the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. And so that's what really brings me here today to be with you. My background has been in pattern recognition and biometrics. And over the years, I've seen AI kind of wave and then winter, and it's back. So, it's really back this time. So anyway, that's just quick background on me. And I'm coming today privileged to be representing the NSCAI. I serve for them as their chief technology advisor on staff. I have to say, Gary, it's really an honor to be on your show, just hearing your story. And thanks for being such a great citizen in promoting this stuff. This is so important, and it's becoming important by the moment, really.
Yeah, indeed. And, those of you who are our viewers, they know a little bit about my origin story. Up until recently, I didn't know anything about technology or cybersecurity, but everything about what it meant to be the CEO of a marketing company that was hacked by insiders, losing several $1 million, laying off 100 people, and pivoting from victim to advocate.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's why it's such a privilege, Michael, to listen and learn from you and the smartest people in the world. It's really quite extraordinary, the people who are kind enough to share their thoughts and insights. And you all are the unsung heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe. So tell us a little bit about the genesis of the report itself.
Yeah, so let me just start off by just describing the commission in our charter. We were created by Congress in the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act, and in our charter, the what we were tasked to do is in that paragraph on the right. It says we are to consider the methods and means necessary to advance the development of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and associated technologies by the United States to comprehensively address the national security and defense needs of the United States. And so what a great charter. First of all, it's really kind of all things AI and, oh, by the way, associated technologies. And then it's comprehensively all things for national security and defense, which includes the intelligence community, Department of Defense, things that happen for law enforcement, homeland security, energy, nuclear stockpile. I mean, it's just comprehensive. And so what Congress did with that charter is they appointed 15 commissioners, and you see them here. And these are really expert people and very successful people coming from business and industry, from academia, and from government. And our leadership starts at the top, inspiration starts at the top. Our chair of the commission is Dr. Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google. And then our vice chair is the Honorable Robert Work. Bob is former Deputy Secretary of Defense. At its peak, we had 50 supporting staff. So all that you're going to hear about today from me is really the culmination of this wonderful collaboration, leadership from these commissioners, just wonderful citizens working hard as staff. And then, Gary, if you want to get into our head and, what are we thinking? From day one, you see this list here called lines of effort. We organized ourselves into teams. And this was from day one. We started looking at how should the United States invest in AI R&D? How should the United States apply AI to the national security mission? People, it's critical. So how are we going to train and recruit the AI talent and help our pipeline for talent in the workforce? There's competition, so it's protecting. How are we going to protect? How are we going to marshal international cooperation? And then I'm really proud to say that in all of this, ethics and responsible AI has been in view and baked in. And we've done a series of reports, but the most recent one is our final report to Congress and the President, which came out on March 1st. So I'll pause there. That's sort of like the commission before I kind of maybe talk about what we mean by AI and about the report. I don't know, any comments, thoughts about the stage that's been set by this commission?
Yeah, I mean, how did the briefing go to Congress? That was just, I think, on Friday, if I'm not mistaken.
There's been several. That was one of the highlights. The briefings have gone just very well. This is a bipartisan commission. I would say the work of the commission has been nonpartisan, and we have been created out of a bipartisan acknowledgement that now's the time for strategy and action and getting the government in a place where we can continue to lead. And so that was reflected really unanimously from Congress on Friday. There's hard questions, no doubt, and there's a lot of work to do. And so that's being acknowledged. But overall, that 750-page set of recommendations is being very well received. And, it's not just words on paper. We actually, in the back, have a whole section of legislative text that supports every recommendation. So lawmakers, they can tweak it. If they align to it, they can cut and paste and drop it into bills. So this is like ready-made, right?
It was unbelievable. That to me was the most interesting part. This is, I think, about a 756-page report, and when I first started to review it, I was thinking to myself, okay, so what? Like, what do you do with all this incredible information? And then you all just laid it out. Let's dive into some basic definitions here for a minute, if that's okay, Michael.
Sounds good. So the commission's perspective on artificial intelligence is it's not any one piece of hardware or software. We like to say it's a constellation of technologies. So this is technologies that solve tasks often requiring human-like perception and cognition and planning and learning, communication, and these technologies may learn and at times act autonomously, and that could be in the form of software agents or embodied robots. And you'll see AI used in common applications like prediction and language understanding and planning and optimization, computer vision, and robotic process optimization or automation. And you can think of AI in the center of this graphic. You can think of AI as this stack of interrelated components. And from the bottom up, it starts, I mentioned before, talent. It's the human element here is still and will remain critical. We need talent to design and implement and deploy. We need talent to audit and monitor. We need talent to use responsibly and effectively. So people are not being cut out of the loop here. Next, we bring in data. And so much of what we're talking about today is because of machine learning, which has this insatiable appetite for data. then there needs to be the ability to compute on that data. So that's the hardware. And then you need the machine learning algorithms and the AI model building engines. So those are the algorithms, and they get bundled up into apps. And that those need to be dropped into either new workflows or existing legacy systems. And one of the things our commissioners are really, they emphasize is that this integration piece is often overlooked, and it's hard. So anyway, everyone likes metaphors. And so AI is like electricity. It's general purpose. It's going to be used, incorporated in virtually all future technologies. The commission believes AI will be the most powerful tool in generations for benefiting humanity and transforming national security. And this creates huge opportunities across society where, we're the National Security Commission. So we've been looking long and deep in how AI is going to affect national security and defense and intelligence. But as I think we all are aware, it's helping to drive forward science. And thank God it's driving forward healthcare, with the COVID pandemic and all that. Education, cities and infrastructure, transportation, energy. It's hard to find in manufacturing. It's hard to look at a sector of society where this technology isn't having some sort of influence.
Indeed. Yeah. And what's amazing about, what you're saying right now is that, any one of these slides that you're sharing here is worth, a week's worth of discussion on this show, because it delves into, all aspects of life. And, one of the things that I'm curious about is, to amplify what you were saying about the need for talent, because I think there's probably a reasonable, cross-section of people who are scared of artificial intelligence. How do you address our audience, about that question? Or is that a valid assumption? Let me check.
Well, no, it's a valid assumption, but things are changing now, but that's not new. So you can take a historical perspective and look at, the Industrial Revolution and how things changed from an agricultural society, right, to an industrial. And now we're moving into this digital age. And so the point is that over time, the nature of work does change. And so, the workforce, managing the workforce, keeping the workforce reskilled as these changes come, making sure that our pipelines of future workers is healthy and filled with competent, eager, innovative Americans that are ready to roll. That's been a huge part of our efforts around that talent piece that I've been talking about. And we have 2 chapters devoted to talent out of our report.
That's fantastic. So speaking of chapters, we have here the 2 broad groupings, of the report. Yeah. Can you share with our audience an overview of the structure of the report itself?
Yeah, because we're not going to hit on everything today. We can't, as you already said. I'll just do a broad brush so that you get the flavor of what's in here by chapter. So we got the 2 parts, defending America on or in the AI era, and then there's winning the technology competition. So with the first part, we come right out of the gate with a chapter on emerging threats stemming from AI. Then we transition into 2 chapters devoted to AI in defense and warfare. Skipping to chapter 5, we then look at AI and its function within the national intelligence community. And then in between, we sandwich a treatment, a very careful treatment on autonomous weapon systems and associated AI-enabled warfare. So very deep. And then we move to this talent piece in chapter 6 that I just described. Then the next 2 is where our ethics work that's been cross-cutting everything, it shines in chapters 7 and 8. The first is the chapter that really drives home the fact we need justified confidence. Americans, the world needs justified confidence in these AI systems. And then chapter 8, we need to uphold our values in all of this. Then moving to the second part, there is a geopolitical stage that we're not really going to unpack here in cyber world, but today, but there is this strategic competition cooperation that needs to take place. It is taking place. We come back to talent. we need to compete. One of the competitions is competing for talent on that global stage. We need to drive AI innovation through research and development. And then chapters 12 and chapters 14 are both elements of how to protect this technology as it emerges and as it's invented. The first one, chapter 12, is more around protecting technology inventions, so patenting and trying to get that right and improving upon that, because you can incentivize with patents, you can kind of encumber with patents. Then there's microelectronics, the hardware part of the stack we were talking about. Then there's this protecting our research and our ideas. And then, of course, this doesn't happen within the borders of our country. It's a global issue. So how should we marshal and collaborate with our international allies and partners? And then there's this whole other kind of parking lot of additional relevant emerging technologies that we've been chartered to look at. So that's the report as it's organized. And what I'll tell your viewers here is so go to nscai.gov, that's our website, and go to the reports, go to the final report. And what you're going to see two options for the final report. One is a traditional PDF. The other one is this really cool online interactive report. It lets you navigate this document based on your interests. You can search in keywords, you can hyperlink between connected sections. It's just a really great way to make this large document accessible.
You know, and kudos to you and your entire team for the way you organized such incredibly complex and varied information into a really interesting read. And I love the interactivity of what you're saying as well. So let's add to the discussion, Mark Raphael. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Hey, Gary, thanks for having me. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Doing well, Mark.
We're so lucky to have Mark with us. He's the CEO of Supremely, and amongst one of many of Mark's talents, he's a bit of an expert in artificial intelligence. So, Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about your origin story?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, guys, it's such a great talk, and I can't stop congratulating Michael and the group behind the report. It's such a great tool, such a trove of information that actually pushing the industry forward. Let me say my origin story. In the last few years, my company, we have been leveraging artificial intelligence to solve some very difficult problems. Like, for example, we were working with authentication of users, and we have been using fingerprints and iris recognition software, working with potential quantum resistant cryptographic algorithm. And then we embark in authentication of media, pictures, audio, and video to kind of try to combat deep fakes. And recently we launched cybermaterial.com, which is a data aggregator to help cyber professionals, executives, and cyber citizens to find actionable data to mitigate the growing number of security threats. So my experience working in the intersection of AI and cyber gave me firsthand knowledge of the challenges to integrate this new set of technologies, which is definitely changing the world.
And, you know, speaking of the world, Mark, you've had a very interesting kind of global series of assignments and things you work on. Maybe you can share with our audience a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we were planning on talking about that later, but I will just show it. So this is a small component. It is an iris recognition sensor. And then let's say 3-4 years ago, we were kind of building a device and we wanted to combine fingerprint recognition and iris recognition to kind of create like a better user authentication from the physical biometrics. And the problem was from coast to coast in the US, you couldn't find a manufacturer that actually was able to create and market this product. So have to go all around the world, from Europe to Asia, of course. And the goal was to avoid manufacturers in China, mostly for IP protection reasons. And we ended up working with a company in South Korea, and then it has been like an experience that actually showed me how I'm not saying far behind, but how complicated it is for the US to embrace this new technology and actually move forward, because there are a lot of companies trying to solve those problems. And when you can find the small components that enable you to build these devices or to put together those technologies, it's a challenge. So yeah, that's why I embrace and I welcome actually this initiative. And I think that's actually a very positive note for this group to put together such great document, but also the recommendations are completely on point.
Yeah, and Michael, maybe you can build on that a little bit, pertaining to competition with other nation states. Who do you think is our biggest competition?
Well, competition.
If you can say, wait, let me clarify. This is live. Let me just do a caveat. If there's something, you are uncomfortable or can't say, just tell me. Yeah.
Well, the competition takes different forms, right?
Right.
And so some of the things that we're looking at here would be competition economically and on the technology stage. And I think we understand by looking at the source and supplies of where our electronics are coming from, who the leaders are. There's also competition taking place, more from a geopolitical and a values perspective. And so there, we can talk more about that along the way, about our values. And of course there, our U.S. position is different from even our allies, say in Europe, when it comes to like data and data protections. Certainly different in terms of our views with countries such as Russia and China.
Yeah, indeed. One of the things that struck me, just as a citizen regarding this report, is the complexity of it, the depth and the breadth, of things. And one of the cool things that Mark and his company does is distill complicated information into things that are a little bit easier to digest. So take a look at this. So I think that's a really cool way to distill, kind of complicated information like this for, a guy like me, for example. And so Mark, if people want to see the entire video, where should they go so they can take a look at it?
Absolutely. It is in our platform on LinkedIn and the page of Cybermaterial or cybermaterial.com. And actually, we're trying to distill this type of videos because we think that they can help not only the professionals, but also and cyber citizens, as I call everybody who uses internet actually is a cyber citizen, where we can actually find and the videos and any other details that they may want about all the emerging and past threats.
Well, that's terrific. And speaking of someone who is not only brilliant in AI in a number of fields, he's also, kind of a cyber citizen as well. Let's welcome to the show, Deli and Atanda. Hey, Deli, how you doing?
Hi, great. Thanks very much for having me, Mark. Gary, great to see you. Michael, fantastic. Fantastic work. Thank you very much for having me on.
And Deli, maybe you can tell our audience just kind of how we met.
Yeah, actually, interestingly, because through comic books, believe it or not. So in light of the conversation that you guys were just having around communicating complex ideas in this space, how do we manage to do that? So we developed a comic series, a cryptographic novel, as we call it, to communicate around data sovereignty, data intelligence, decentralization, and all of the social issues around this new technology landscape that's emerging, and using that to connect these issues with people in a much more emotional and compelling way than the dry sort of technical manner that we're normally accustomed to discussing these things. And of course, Gary has been working similarly on using comic stories to address complex cyber issues. So I think we connected through the cyber space effectively, and started exploring our common ideas around that, and then got really much deeper down the rabbit hole, as is inevitable, to understand the correlation between a lot of the activities we're working on.
And related to this, at least tangentially, can you just give us a quick briefing on non-fungible tokens, NFTs?
Right. It's a great NFTs, non-fungible tokens. It's a great thing, actually. I was reading something yesterday. It said, bizarrely enough, if you want an analogy for NFTs, NFTs are like everything in our life. All the things that in our lives, the things that are actually the anomaly are fungible tokens, right? Like money and these things that are kind of replaceable, interchangeable with each other. But in short, NFTs really are. Well, you can put it like this. This is a way that I think is easier to think about it. One of the challenges of digitizing the world, of moving into this digital era, is this, that it's very easy to replicate anything that's created. And when we think about cybersecurity, for example, IP is a big threat, right? So the ability to take IP and replicate it electronically is a massive threat. Now, cryptography, cryptocurrencies, decentralized ledger technologies came along, and they took effectively one of the most sensitive forms of digital content, which is money, and developed a framework around how could you prevent money from being copied and replicated and defrauded, and basically built out a system which is, you can think of it as a proof of concept of the ability to be able to create an ability to protect information in a digital age. And so, but it was done around money, which is an interchangeable, fungible item. So NFTs really are using the same technology to account for everything else in the digital space, effectively. And I think that's really important, because we're at very early days in terms of it, and it's being used to tokenize things like art. We are pioneering using it to tokenize graphic novels and comics in that sense. But I think the far-reaching implication of it, and why we've always been attracted by NFTs, is being able to use it to tokenize data, to tokenize information. And in that sense, I think NFTs are at the forefront of a step change in information security.
Well, on that note, we can have a whole show about that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So let's turn back, Michael, to the report, regarding threat assessments. Tell us what we're looking at here, and everyone can jump in.
Yeah, that's right. So this is a graphic taken directly from our report from Chapter 1. And it's the commissioners truly believe that adversaries, they're going to use AI to take advantage of our society's digital dependence in all walks of life, and transforming personal and commercial vulnerabilities into potential national security weaknesses. And so AI, at the bottom, unpacking this real quick, we have current cyber threats. that can be advanced by AI systems, which basically takes these threats and extends their range and their reach. There is new AI threats coming from, or new threats coming from AI systems. A little bit to the NFTs that Dele was talking about, trying to deal with deep fakes and computational propaganda, for example, coming from more powerful generative AI. And then there's this other area called adversarial AI, where threats are intentionally trying to attack aspects of the AI stack I mentioned earlier. And then if you look at the top of this graphic, you sort of see traditional non-state actors represented on the left, but because AI is largely implemented in software that's an open source, it now finds its hands in non-state actors. And so we must, when we're thinking about cyber and security, we need to think about non-state actors as well. And then just some of the areas that the threats show themselves that we focused on. This gets back to some of what Dele's technology perhaps could help with, is the malign information operation. So this is this disinformation and using technology to amplify existing fractures and cracks in societies through propaganda. There's more directed data harvesting and micro-targeting. In this case, adversaries, they want to build profiles of you, your beliefs, your behavior, your biological makeup, and then tailor attempts to manipulate and coerce you. There's just going to be more robust and faster cyber attacks and malware. And then something that the commission also looked at as an associated technology with AI is AI-enabled biotech. And with our rapid response to the COVID virus, this has been really helpful, but we're talking about programmable biology. And so from a threat perspective, this could lead to human augmentation, AI engineered pathogens, and so forth. So this threat landscape is pretty rich, and it's pretty serious. And I'll pause there and allow my colleagues to interact with this.
Yep, Dele, Mark, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah.
Please go ahead, Mark.
Actually, I wanted to kind of amplify all the findings by we can summarize it this way. AI is for cybersecurity a gift and a curse. So it's a gift where we can actually solve a lot of problems, or we are actually in the process to solve some of those problems. We actually see the lights at the end of the tunnel, we think. But at the same time, it brings a whole new game where we got so many other issues that we are still trying to wrap our heads around and say, you know what we're going to be doing? It's because this is terrible. Let's just give you an example. Take data harvesting, right? And micro-targeting. Let's say that right now, we're producing, just a stats for 2020, 44 zettabytes of data. That means, so you understand, to put it in perspective, 1,000 bytes to the power of 7. So it's 21 zeros. What that means is that we produce a lot of data. And this data, which is good to help us solve a lot of problems, to help us understand the universe, it's also a big source of problems, because the bad guys, bad actors, nation state actors, cyber criminals, they also get their hands on this data, and they can use it to construct profiles, like build a Wikipedia for every human being. So they gather your data from social media, from Clubhouse, from TikTok, wherever you are putting it out. Actually, I do have a saying. I say, right now, I think parents will have to read the Miranda warning for privacy to their kids. That will be something like that. You have the right to remain silent on the internet. Anything you say can and will be used in court of law anywhere.
So true.
And this is absolutely true, because they have the ability to put together all this data and put it in perspective, study it for a long time, and use it for social engineering attacks or micro-targeting attacks. So it's not a joke. I don't know if you want to amplify or continue, Dele.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know that we've spoken about this among ourselves, and I have to say, Michael, I was really impressed with the report. It was a really phenomenal read and very comprehensive, and really tackled the issues. And I think I was saying to Gary when we first started talking about it, I had read the previous report last year, and I found that there had been such a dramatic shift in the approach this year. And what was so encouraging about it was that it really kind of addressed this issue about values. Really, what are the principles that we are going to start from? Because I think the world is only going to get a lot more complicated, particularly around the technology, around the threat vectors, and around bad actors and the like. But ultimately, when you really kind of unpack it all, I think we are in the middle of a new information paradigm, whether it's information society, information revolution, we're information economy, we're in the thick of it. But in that context, the biggest battle is a battle for values and principles. And I think that's where we are at as a species, not just as a society at the moment. I think at a species, we're at a nexus point where we have to make some really important choices to really define what our future is going to look like.
And
I think
Dele, you said, excuse the interruption, I just want our audience to benefit from the kind of the stack, of the four kinds of aspects to it. I think you've developed a really clever framework to think about these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we set up this NGO a while ago looking at addressing these issues about digital human rights, which for us has always been a North Star. And to be effective in this space, we realized that you need what we call a social stack that effectively has 4 layers to it. And the first layer there is around moral, ethics, values, principle. And as I say, for us, that our guiding star there is human rights, which in itself is no simple feat, but looking at them particularly in the context of cyberspace. And then those principles around what is right effectively should drive legislation and policy. So that becomes a second layer. What is allowed? What is legal? And then the third layer, which is really important, is the economics. And that's really around what is incentivized, what is rewarded. And, as a society, how do we economically operate, create the right kind of checks and balances, pulls and levers to facilitate what we believe to be right and legal. And then lastly, which is the important point, is the technology that then brings that whole stack to life, that enforces all of that. And I think too often in the past, we've started the opposite way around, started from the technology, what's possible, and then really worked out, well, what is economic, what's profitable, is it legal, and is it right? Well, we'll deal with that later. I think we're at the point now where we actually have to start from the basis of what is right, because the principles, the implications of the principles can be very complicated, but the principles themselves are relatively straightforward. And I think that this gives us clarity to be able to cut through the noise and be able to push forward. And just one thing I wanted to say on that as well, that something that Michael said earlier that I think is really critical is this idea of layers, that on one hand, we're competing on certain layers and collaborating on others. And I think particularly when it comes to the issue of AI, I mean, yes, and it's really interesting when you look at the layers of threat, right? Like, bad actors, organized criminals, for example, versus state level actors versus competitors, and I think it's pretty clear to say that our primary competitor in this space is China in that regards. But when you look at the China-America relationship and the East-West paradigm, for example, of course, we're back to this battle of values and principles. And I think when we look at what's happened in China in the last year around the surveillance state and the social scores and all of these things. This threat has become real, tangible, and material in many regards. But I also think that there is another important layer, which again I was really refreshed, really encouraged to see in the report, and that is that we do also need bilateral relations with China, and we do need to think about planet scale threats and approaching those together, and how we bring, and in many ways there is a bit of a kind of diversity of thinking mindset at play here, because and we are talking about AI after all, right? And there is a difference in logic, for example, in Western logic versus Eastern logic. Eastern logic historically has always been very circular. Western logic, I mean, going back to Greece, has always been very linear. And I think that as AI starts to evolve, these differences will start to play out more in terms of the systems that we develop. But ultimately, I think when we're dealing with the planet scale threats that we're going to face more of over the next decade, and certainly over this century, we're going to need both of them working in concert to actually solve.
Indeed. I mean, that's such a someone's got to have to mute your mic. I'm hearing someone myself. There you go. Thanks. That's such a giant issue, planet level thinking. One can only hope that, especially even given the massive planetary reset from COVID, maybe now is an opportunity to kind of, move from grief, to growth in this way, to have a more collaborative planet on these massively important topics, based upon values. And I can't think of a better person. Here's one of our rapid responders. You may have noticed I put out like a little bat signal. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
You really got me on the spot there with my muted mic. How's it going, Gary?
well, good. I mean, I thought what a great time to bring in a rapid responder to talk about the future of the planet. Any thoughts about that pertaining to AI?
Wow, that is one thing that I was not expecting. The future of the planet. Well, I'll kind of sum it up in terms of the trained workforce. That's something that Michael has talked about within the report in terms of training. The major aspect that we all have to remember is it's an entire ecosystem. So maybe that's the tie in terms of the full global scale of this would be the AI ecosystem and the future of the planet, where we really need to think about training the workforce and policymakers around the AI, which I think this report does. And I think it's just the beginning in moving forward. I teach at a few different universities around this. And I think one of the biggest aspects is tying all these pieces together.
And you're in a pretty unique position to have an informed opinion on that. Maybe you can share with our audience your background and your role as president of the, I don't want to get this wrong, the AI Foundation?
Close, but thanks. Executive director of the AI Association.
Okay.
Also global head of government and public services for 6clicks, which uses natural language processing to really look at different laws, control sets, and standards around supply chain management and the security around supply chain management. So those take up a lot of the day, but it's definitely important in thinking about supply chains, information and security management, as well as training the new workforce through different universities, as we think about these things.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially now with solar winds, that did quite a bit of damage on the supply chain. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I don't know if anyone would not agree that was a major issue. And you can even think about Microsoft with their Exchange, on-prem email exchange. That is something that they're still thinking about. Amazon is having some of those issues as well. So this isn't going to go away. I think it's just going to continue to amplify, and we're starting to see I think you had someone on your show earlier about the Florida water supply. Municipalities in Atlanta had this as well in terms of different issues. And so training the different agencies at the state level and local level is just as important as from a federal level and in this international level. I was on the ad hoc committee for the ACUS, or the Administrative Conference of the United States, on the agency use of artificial intelligence. And that was one of the biggest things, was in thinking about transparency, thinking about bringing a new workforce into the agencies that understand the math and the computer science and also the political and policy information that we need to think about.
Yeah, indeed, and also the value system. We have another great rapid responder here. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Hey, how you guys doing there?
This is
Great to
Scott Schubert. He's in addition to being a great friend, a bit of a mentor to me. So anything you like about the things that you're hearing or seeing from our show is because of Scott. Anything you dislike is because of Scott. So, Scott, maybe you can share with our audience a little bit about your background. And you have a rather unique, I think, perch, because your company manufactures physical devices. So it's not just software. Maybe you can amplify a little bit, about that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about 5G.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just in brief, my company, Berkeley Varitronic Systems, we're really a hardware company, as Gary mentioned there. So what we're actively doing is designing and building wireless threat detection tools that really go to different cybersecurity agencies, mostly DoD agencies. And our focus is on the wireless aspect, where wireless is the conduit to hack into government agencies where they're housing classified information. And interestingly enough, and I'm so glad that looking through this report, Michael, it's brilliant, because a lot of the things we read about and hear about in headlines, this report is actually addressing AI as here and now and looking forward to the future. So some of the active developments and research that my company has been doing over the past few years, they're becoming reality. In other words, we're always trying to mimic really humans, the way we think, the way we act, and building upon past things we learn. That's really what effective AI is. And now we're implementing that into some of our tools so we can think and anticipate what a hacker is going to be doing, trying to break in and steal personal information or classified information like that. Implementing that into our tools is exciting because we're seeing the benefits of it. We're collecting oodles of data. This big data that really helps AI shine is now effectively being used as algorithms pull that information out and make actionable items. So to me, this is kind of a turning point in the digital world that we're at, because AI is being harnessed, the power of it, to do good and to beat the bad guy. So I think it's a really exciting thing. And then to answer the second part of your question there, I see 5G. And of course, since we're in the world of wireless, 5G and Wi-Fi 6, really two key components of this next wave of AI things that are going to be emerging. And being able to protect that space is important from a company like ours, but also being able to use it because of the high throughput, the low latency and delays that we're dealing with right now with 4G LTE current technologies. I think 5G is going to be a game changer where it'll allow AI to unleash and do so many more things. So again, great to be on, and awesome work on that report there. And I'm so excited to see that companies are going to be actively using this information as building steps and taking action items in this expansion of AI. Exciting times.
Yeah, indeed. And so, Michael, let's turn back to you. Let's delve a little bit further into the report, if you will.
Sure. So kind of backing up to the values discussion, what you see on the screen here is the chapter dividers. They're like graphical table of contents for two chapters covering ethics and values that I mentioned earlier. I'd like to just let the audience know that the Commission has a firm conviction that the United States must demonstrate how a democracy should use AI. And in so doing, how to protect the security of its citizens while upholding democratic values. And Dele was getting at some of this. And our security applications of AI, they must conform to core values of individual liberty and equal protection under the law. And the objective here is to continue for the U.S. to lead the world in driving AI innovation and technologies while maintaining our core democratic values, and not to lose them, and not to lose what makes us America in the face of competing adversaries that may not hold to the same standards of values that we've been talking about. And
Wow.
yeah, and so I'd like to point your viewers to it's a supplemental document to the report. It's called Key Considerations around the ethical and responsible use of AI. And some of the categories that get unpacked in that document, and there's an abridged version in an appendix of the report. We're talking about these areas of developing AI in a way that aligns with American values and the rule of law, engineering principles, performance of AI, how to deal with human and AI teaming in that interaction, and then overall accountability and governance. So there's a lot of rich work done there, and that's become part of the DNA. And one of the things you'll see as you read through the report, you're going to see endnotes, and those endnotes are filled with references, and this is really great to our key considerations for ethics and values.
And what is our audience to make of what we're seeing now on the screen?
Yeah, this is this associated technologies that was put in to our charter. Scott was just talking about 5G. Our commissioners and our staff have spent a significant amount of time looking and assessing issues around 5G. In that case, one of the concerns again is supply chain. There's one predominant provider of 5G on the planet. It's Huawei out of China. There's currently no other single supplier that can compete with it in terms of price and quality. And we think that's an issue. And so we need to bring this technology to bear and actually create technologies comparable on the domestic side. And then also to really tap into so that the government and the Department of Defense particularly has access to the spectrum when it needs it. The Commission strongly urges that the spectrum that 5G is going to serve up needs to be the mid-band spectrum, as it's called, needs to be shared and intelligently shared. But so that's 5G. But another area and that we hear a lot of is quantum computing. And I'll just say that we're not sure when we're actually going to see viable kind of commercial quantum technologies, quantum computers, but our commission does not think it's too early. We actually think now is the time to work in quantum because we don't want to end up in the same place we are right now with high-end chips. We want domestic production to be able to take place here. And so some of the mechanisms for that, the government is going to have to write some big checks to supplement this stuff. And to do this manufacturing high-end chips and bring it back, that equipment is extremely expensive. And then it's also about just boosting the research and development of these things. So that's quantum, and I think Mark might have a few thoughts about quantum. But we also looked at, I mentioned the biotech. I mentioned I didn't mention, but we were looking at like the importance of emerging technologies around new and improved storage for energy, as an example. So there's a number of these different emerging technologies, and just to give one highlight from the report is we actually think that the U.S. government needs to be even more strategic about handling and steering into and embracing and adopting these emerging technologies, all the way that we give a recommendation that there should be a new office out of the vice president for looking at technology competitiveness and looking at emerging technologies. Mark, what are your thoughts about quantum?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, in the community, we are kind of making fun. We say that quantum will put everything in society on steroid, like bad or good. So get ready to see everything amplified, and that's true. And specifically in the cyberspace, we are already getting started with the race to find quantum-resistant cryptography because we already know and that the current infrastructure we are using for key management to kind of secure communication, secure data at rest or in transit, it's not going to work. So I've seen an initiative from the NIST in the past few years where they call for papers for companies, individuals to bring new ideas. And this is absolutely terrifying. And also it's a thrill for people working in the industry. And we can say that even though we are not that close to a device, a quantum computer where people, users going to have their hands on it, but we feel like there is a need now to get started. So the report was on point to kind of highlight that and give some absolutely great recommendations. Mostly on the investment side, we have seen the comparison between in the US and China, like how they kind of centralized, they got a specific plan and they are executing on it like very faithfully.
Dele, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, quantum's back and a really interesting one. I think I find it interesting for three reasons. I think one, the whole quantum world in itself, it's like classical physics versus quantum physics, right? It's a complete step change in how we think about reality. And quantum computing in many ways is completely different to classical computing. I think in the short term, the immediate threat is definitely around cryptography and quantum resistant cryptography, particularly when you think about distributed ledger technologies and the inevitable increasing reliance we will have on them from information systems and financial systems management's perspective. So quantum resistant encryption is going to be key. But I also think, I mean, and you know, Mark knows this probably better than me. Quantum is there's a particular type of computing, type of problems that quantum is very effective at solving. So again, I think to Michael's point, in the biotech space, this is going to be an area where quantum is going to really unleash a step changes, because it's very good at looking at problems where there are multiple kind of strands of permutations of types of answers, like in cryptography or like in gene sequencing and the like. And in that sense, the foreseeable future is one where classical computing and quantum computing live side by side, and that intense tasks are resolved through quantum means. But there are classical programming, in a sense, is not really what quantum does at the moment, at least. And it's a way off before we get to a point where it can start to replace those types of tasks. But the third area that is really interesting for me around quantum is around data itself. And in many ways, I think that the approach that we've taken to data management, data protection is as significant as a shift from classical computing to quantum computing. In fact, what we create are these quantum data sets, because I think what's really important from an information security perspective is that we are going to have to move away from being solely reliant on perimeter security. And we are going to have to get to information object level security and encryption. And that's really kind of the heart of our approach to data. I call it more of an atomic approach to information management, as opposed to a more kind of typically fluid or liquid sort of context of data, where you can think of data objects as particles rather than these reservoirs, lakes, oceans of information, where you can isolate data sets and put the right level of encryption around that. So I think that's going to be really critical in the information war that we're in many regards, but also in the information security paradigm that we approach. And I think that goes hand in hand with an information quality proposition, whether it's intentional or unintentional, i.e. data that is just inaccurate versus data that is designed to be misinforming or misleading. But I think that that's going to be critical in advancing AI at pace rapidly, because the AI will only be as good as the quality of the information that is used to train it, that is used to develop it, and is used to expand it in that sense. So I think there's a whole
Indeed.
quantum shift that is coming in terms of processing, information management, and machine development.
And Michael, you're going to get a stiff neck. You were nodding your head in agreement so much. Tell us what you're thinking about what Dele just said.
No, I mean, so I resonated with that, and so this is looking toward the future, where we can look at more at this atomic level of managing and dealing with data. One of the things I was privileged to do on the commission was to lead a special project in AI and data, and to be able to deal with zero trust, right? And be able to have data protected, but have it be addressable and findable at its atomic levels so that it's discoverable, it's composable, it can be done so according to policy and responsibly and appropriately. But it moves the world from having data lakes where you have a copy of the data, I have a copy of the data, Dele and Mark have a copy of the data, or subsets of it. No, let it have its own residence in cyberspace, and let it have its own unique addressability, have its own protection at the atomic level. So I really think that this might not pan out, but I think this is one of these future visions. And I was up at MIT visiting, and one of the researchers sitting beside me leaned over and said, "Look, we need to push this out to the edge, like we're talking about." So anyway, I'm very much in agreement. I think that with 5G and those technologies, that'll add to the size of the bandwidth. With internet protocols, IPv6, and then whatever comes next, so that we can have massive and maybe hierarchical addressability, so we can deal with the 10 to the 27 mark elements of data in the universe, but because we need to start moving compute to data, and the data is a challenge from a policy perspective, but it's a challenge technically as well.
Well, just to also build on 5G, Scott, there was recently an auction of additional spectrum in the wireless sector. Can you share with our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of pockets of spectrum that's been identified with the FCC that they're pushing through, and it's starting to get adopted. And a lot of the big tech companies, if you looked at some of the recent auctions, are spending an enormous amount of money to own part of this spectrum, and they're actually deploying it rapidly. A lot of our equipment is used to actually do the early stages of testing, and we're getting hit with tons of requests for spectrum tests in the 3 gigahertz band up to the 5 gigahertz band, and some of the millimeter wave stuff, which is up at the 28 to 32 gigahertz stuff. So it's moving really rapidly. In the past, you'd hear it over the course of a decade. These things are now happening in less than a year. So it's very quick adoption, quick testing, and quick implementation for the technology, which to me is very exciting. It's not a lot of talk, but it's a lot of action in the world of spectrum build out and the auctions. And of course, they're making a lot of money in the process with FCC and the government there, but it's for good use for the spectrum there, and spreading it out for the right reasons, from a security perspective, from a communications perspective, and really to handle this rich data that's just everywhere. I think average company that collects big data right now to analyze it, about 85% of the data they collect is never even looked at. That tells you fundamentally that we need to use artificial intelligence and ultimately quantum computing to harness the power of this big data to make good, sound decisions. And 5G is really one of the keys that's going to get us there quicker and faster.
I want to turn to a viewer comment from Corey that I put up a little bit earlier, and I'd like everyone to kind of opine on this because, someone once famously said that if you're not paying for the service, you are the product. And so, what do you think about Corey's, good insight here, about how to do this?
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at this. In chapter 8, the title of our chapter there is Upholding Democratic Values. And so part of Corey's framing of his question talked about changing values. And I'd like to share a perspective that I think reflects the commission is that, we're a democracy in process. We're still working out how to deal with this technology in an equitable way. And so that's why we've put forward the key considerations, things like that. But upholding our values of democracy, what does that mean? That means not changing, but elevating and making assurance that we maintain privacy and civil liberties and civil rights in this country and promote that across the world with technology. So I don't see that as changing. I see us as improving in how we uphold those rights.
Indeed. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. The notion that we're not we're not acting or showcasing this democracy. That seems to be a conversation that's been happening over the last 4 years in terms of media. But behind the scenes, I think even the Senate has put together a bipartisan initiative around they call it the Democracy. So the word's even in there, Democracy Technology Partnership Act. And this includes even big names, with Marco Rubio on one side and Senator Mark Warner on the other, right? On different sides of the aisle. And the list is even bigger than that. So you have Senator Schumer on one and, Senator Sassy, on the other. And the whole goal around that would be to develop sort of these interagencies or an interagency office within the State Department to bring partnerships between these democratic countries and develop some more standards and norms in technology development across the supply chain that we call with our allies. So that's my response to that, is that there's a lot happening that we can't see normally unless you're in the halls of Congress or these agencies.
And along those lines, Josh, if the viewers here wanted to see the commission's thoughts on that, all they have to do is jump into chapter 15. Over.
Yeah, I just chime in on that as well. I understand where Corey's coming from with that question and that point. And I think it's probably safe to say that America is the world's greatest democracy. I think that's a given. That said, I do think that as a species, these principles of democracy are a work in progress. And they are a set of principles that we aspire to and that we can work towards to making our systems more democratic, more abiding with those fundamental principles of democracy. So I do think that there is a lot of room for development on the what and how, or more on the how we go about being more democratic. I think the principles of democracy in themselves are relatively robust. Like I say, again, similar to human rights, there's only 30 principles, right? They're relatively straightforward. But how we actually bring those to life and how we execute them, I think there's plenty of room for innovation and development. And we see this happening in the tech space now, particularly in the decentralized technology space, where there's models of governance, models of actually putting these principles of democracy to the test with things like quadratic voting and all of these kind of principles that aim to make our systems more democratic in effect in how they actually operate. So, I think that we should always, I think we should always strive, democracy like an ideal that we should always strive to move closer towards and more complete in our sort of embracing in our technologies and systems.
Well, on that note, it's clear that we could go on, forever because of the intellectual prowess we have here, all your real life unsung heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe online at work and home at school. And so I've planted the seed in my own brain, and maybe you guys will be amenable, but I think we should do a series of micro conferences, like maybe 4 days in a row, something like this, to delve, deep into the report as a framework. And so let me ask my audience if that's something they think would be important, and valuable, to them. But really, on behalf of a grateful nation, thank you so much for everything that you do. So let's go around and just have some final thoughts. Mark, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience to amplify your mission, and tell us, where they can get more information about some of the cool stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, and thanks a lot, guys, for having me. It has been a great talk, and I really enjoyed and learned a lot. And on top of that, I think this coming together is what will be the game-changing aspect we are bringing in the industry, in the world. So regarding the question related to democracy, I can see it as well as like cybersecurity. It's everyone's responsibilities. We don't have to stand by and just look what's happening to us, but we can actively participate and create changes. So in this case, and personally, AI is coming, you want it or not, it's already here. It's changing the world. There are a whole lot new technologies coming with it that are gonna amplify and make things worse or better. We have to embrace that and find ways to bring solutions. There are small solutions, there are big ones. We have to come together and think about regulations, develop new technologies to try to solve them and make the better of it.
Yeah, indeed. And how should people get in touch with you?
Absolutely, they can reach out either through cybermaterial.com or the LinkedIn website, the LinkedIn profile. They can follow us there.
Okay, Scott, what do you think? This has been a wide-ranging, incredibly interesting discussion. And what are your closing thoughts?
Fabulous discussion and some great takeaways. I think for myself personally, as I dove into the report, what I really appreciated is, and we talked about certainly the government's role, technology companies, and even us, perhaps as consumers. It really involves all of us. And I think that's fundamentally key. This affects each and every one of our lives because artificial intelligence touches all of us. So I think it is important that we delve into the report, read it, benefit from it, and utilize it, and take some actions if we're companies out there, and embrace AI, because it's here for the long haul. It's not just in the headlines. It's not talking about it. It is here right now, and it will make our lives better if we work together and share information. I think that's really fundamental and important. And my selfish aspects are always in the world of cybersecurity, kind of build upon Mark's standpoint. AI is exciting and it's also scary in the world of cybersecurity. So I think we have to stay involved in it and learn about it and utilize it to beat any of the bad guys. Certainly, if you want to find out more about myself and what I'm doing, you can go to my website is scottschubert.com. And then some of the things that my company's doing, it's simply www.b as in Bravo, V as in Victor, and then systems spelled out plural.com. And we could learn about more of the wireless threat detection tools and things we're doing in the world of cybersecurity. But thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. We appreciate it. And Josh, you were kind of called in this at the last minute. I don't think you've seen one of our shows. So here, we're live on a sort of a qualitative scale of 1 to 10, 1 being awful, 10 being, I can't believe it. How would you rate this show? Remember, it's live and we're watching you.
It's a 10. Obviously, it's a 10. It's a 10. 10 being great. So I'm honored to be on the show, and thank you for inviting me. And I'll just say that probably my favorite superhero right now. Just I think based off the new movies would be the Hulk is kind of a cool super movie. I don't know if you've ever heard anyone say that, but the kind of adaptation and change between his brains and his brawn, right? So,
well, that's pretty deep. That's deeper than I've heard so far in analysis of Hulk, but I love it.
There you go. There you go. I threw my LinkedIn up there, but best way to get in touch with me is through LinkedIn. Or you can find me at josh@sixclicks.io. It's probably one of the best ways to emails to get in touch with me.
Is that the number 6?
The number 6. Yeah, that's right. So,
all right, cool. And Michael, you began this great discussion, and you have an opportunity to close it.
Well, Gary, really grateful to have been invited to be a part of this. And gentlemen, great to get to meet you in cyberspace. Hopefully, we can continue to interact and dialogue on these important things. Gary, I appreciate the opportunity to shine just a little bit of light on the work of the commission. We do think that this was the right time for such a commission, and we have done our best to create recommendations, deeply assessed recommendations that we think would set the right conditions for our country going forward. And we tried to make it accessible. So I mentioned the interactive report. So if you want to dig in, I recommend get online, nscai.gov, go to the reports and take a look at that interactive report, because it really, it makes the report your report, because you get to engage with it in a way that just having page after page after page is not so helpful. Also, if you'd like to contact the commission, on our website, under Contact Us, there's a number of different emails. One would be a general inquiry at nscai.gov. But if there's press that want to get a hold of us, press at nscai.gov. And then also there's a link for Congressional Affairs contact, Congress at nscai.gov. So I wish everyone here great success in your endeavors, as we all are looking to advance this ecosystem of technology for humanity. And Gary, I wish you all the success with what you have going here, the community that you have built and you continue to build. And I just appreciate your mission, and let's keep the word going out, and let's keep the public informed of the good things that are happening, but also what it means to be a good citizen. And even more relevant here is how do we protect ourselves in this digital world in cyberspace? And it's going to take savvy. This technology is going to do great things for us, but it's also going to get stealthier. It's going to get more targeted. And if we're not practicing good cyber hygiene, we are going to become victims at some point. So,
yeah, indeed.
Thanks,
and you're welcome. And Michael, we're hiring, just so you know, we just can't pay you anything. So anyone else who wants to get hired and not be paid, just send me an email at GaryCyberHeroesComics.com. If you want to be a guest on our show, all you need is something cool or cutting edge, that you want us to help amplify, and really just thanks to everybody. And we appreciate the opportunity for all of you to join us today and take time out of your valuable schedules to be here. And I'm also happy to say that we're just getting our first sort of inquiries about sponsoring our show. So if there are folks out there who want to make money and do the right thing, also send me an email. My wife would be incredibly grateful, as would I. On that note, again, thank you on behalf of all the unsung cyber heroes who toil in anonymity. Have a great day.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.